Welcome everybody to the double FU, the FU times two, the fantasy football universe. Welcome in free agency day 2, smack in the middle of it. And we're here to talk about everything that's already happened, some of the things that are to come. And I'm joined here by Jesse Moeller at jmoeller05. I am Jeremy Schulman at FF_Rebel, streaming on Twitter. Available on our website, on our YouTube, all over the place, just trying to get a handle on what's happening here. Jesse, how you feeling about free agency so far?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's been another hectic day. Like, I still just can't keep up all the notifications. I check my phone. Something news dropped again, and I'm like, okay, all right, cool. We got some new stuff happening. So, yeah, the last 48 hours have been pretty chaotic as far as us fantasy football degenerates are concerned.
Absolutely nuts, man. Absolutely nuts. Like yesterday, we had long discussions about DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, lots of running backs falling into place. We've had even more running backs falling into place here today. We'll run through a full list, but I think first and foremost, we should probably talk about the big domino to finally drop Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens. We've been waiting on this one. Surprisingly, it was one of the last running backs to actually sign instead of one of the first that we all assumed this was a shoo-in. Finally happens. How are we feeling about Derrick Henry now in Detroit?
Yeah, I was gonna say Detroit. Ooh, that would be so weak. No, in Baltimore. Literally, I had a friend message me. He goes like, "I forgot he played for Tennessee. It feels like he's been a Baltimore Raven his entire life." And I'm like, it's so true, right? There's not a better fit for what Derrick Henry does than what the Baltimore Ravens do. And like, I know we talk about Henry at this point in year. The Ravens are first in the NFL from 2020 to 2023 in yards before contact. And then you're pairing that with Derrick Henry, who's been top 10 the last 5 years in yards after contact. So what you're creating is just this juggernaut running through a wall, and you're not going to be able to stop him. So I put a tweet out where he's going to run over 1,500 yards. Like, I expect him to be another mid-level, high-end RB1 this season. Like, I think this is the ideal situation for him personally. How are you looking about it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Derrick Henry for his entire career was never a great catcher of the football. We never really expected a gargantuan amount of targets, especially in Tennessee with what they were doing and Ryan Tannehill kind of looking to scramble more than check down. Now we have the ultimate scrambling quarterback back there in the backfield with Henry. We know he's not going to catch many passes, and we don't care. The best part about this is Lamar Jackson is going to continue to do what Lamar Jackson does and open up space for the running backs. It's the reason why Gus Edwards has been so successful in his career for the most part. It's the reason why J.K. Dobbins in his limited work has been successful. The defense has to account for Lamar Jackson. So when they do that, the space automatically opens up. The field is stretched horizontally, whether the defense wants it to or not. And Derrick Henry is just going to be able to pick his holes and run wherever the hell he wants.
Yeah, it's going to be glorious. They had 541 rushing attempts, and people are probably thinking, well, yeah, Lamar had a good chunk of that. Lamar only had 148 rushing attempts. So you take the difference on that, and you're like, all right, cool. That's 300 rushing attempts right there. If you take the rest of the running back room. Obviously, it's going to increase more to Derrick Henry because that's how good running back is, but he is going to be fed. It's going to be – that's their style of football they've always wanted to play. So I am a little bit concerned about the ancillary options, a.k.a. Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and all those guys. I think Mark Andrews will be fine just because he's the number one guy in that offense, but I'm curious to see how it affects the other guys in that offense because we know Derrick Henry, he's always commanded volume his entire career.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely not going to change. Now, if we look at the numbers here, so Henry was signed for 2 years, $16 million. Obviously, there's different types of guarantees and bonuses in all these contracts, but just looking at it from a very superficial lens, that means that he ties the annual per year salary of DeAndre Swift and Tony Pollard, and they're both making $4 million less per year than Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley. Anything interesting to you about the way that those contracts ended up shaking out? Aaron Jones coming in 6 with $7 million per year. Or does that kind of feel right to you based on where all these guys are in their career?
The most surprising contract of all of them, I mean, the Jacobs one, he's the top earner in this, so he's a little bit surprising, but he's been a good back as the majority of his career, so I get it. The Swift one still stands out to me because that was the one where the the Chicago Bears went out and they were like, all right, we want DeAndre Swift. And I was like, of all of the running backs available, you're going to take DeAndre Swift? I mean, I get it. Y'all got a type, but it's just that one stood out to me. The Henry one all along seemed like he was going to go to the Ravens. I mean, we were kind of wish-cashing that, and then we got our dreams for it.
Yep.
And he's just older. He's 30 years old, so he's not going to get the top market that, Jacobs, who's 26, or Saquon, who's 27, is going to get, right? So that age difference leans into it. So, it's a good deal for Baltimore. And it just It reinforces the stereotype around the lack of quality coming into the league at the running back class this year.
Yeah, especially with Gus Edwards now going over to Los Angeles and the Chargers, right? Baltimore had that hole. They certainly have Keaton Mitchell, who flashed last year, is coming off of injury. They need to do more in that backfield with J.K. Dobbins gone. So Henry is not the end of it, but like you mentioned, we're expecting at least 250 touches here, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, if you look at his stats, even last year he still had 280 rushing attempts, and that was a dip from the year before where he had 349. So, like, he's gonna get. I would not be surprised to see him pushing 20 rushing attempts a game. He might not hit that exact number, but he's gonna be pushing in that range between probably 15 and 20. And then you know, as long as he stays healthy, like he's gonna go well over 300 rushing attempts is what I would expect to happen for Henry.
Yeah. And then just thinking about the Baltimore offense, right? So now we have Henry in the backfield, obviously. We have Zay Flowers, who's a fantasy darling. We have Mark Andrews, hopefully recovering. Isaiah Likely. But Devin Duvernay's gone. Oh, no. We got Nelson Aguilar. They got to do something else at wide receiver, right? Whether in free agency or the draft.
Yeah. I mean, they still have to because outside of Zay Flowers, it's just a bunch of question marks in that wide receiver room, right? Those guys just can't stay healthy. And like OBJ is basically gone. He's who knows where he's gonna end up. So it's Zay Flowers. You got Mark Andrews, who's supposedly healthy, but still dealing with injury coming back. It's just a lot of question marks. So I would expect them to spend like day 1 or day 2 capital on a wide receiver to improve that room because let's be real, like you want as many good players in that offense to help out Lamar because we saw against the Chiefs, like they completely became a shell of themselves. And you saw really them trying to force passing, and there was really no way they could pass to. So it was just like, yeah, they definitely need another weapon. So hopefully Henry gives them that, locks that spot down. Maybe they add another running back like day 3, you know, go from there. And then, yeah, the wide receiver, and you make it all happen.
Yeah. Any hope at all for fringe fantasy relevance from Justice Hill? Sorry.
No, I'm just going to say no. unless there's an injury to Henry, but I don't even really want to talk about that just because there's been so many injuries in Baltimore the last few years. It's like, just keep them healthy, please. Just keep the guys healthy. That's all you want.
Amen, man. I hear that. Another guy we mentioned just a bit earlier was Aaron Jones. Josh Jacobs signed in Green Bay. They jettisoned Jones immediately, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're on the same page here. I still love Aaron Jones. I think he's a good talent, even if he's lost perhaps a step. He's still got most of his bag left. Now he secures the bag going to Minnesota on a 1-year deal for $7 million. I don't know who was hoping and praying to the fantasy guys that Ty Chandler was going to be a thing, but that's dead in the water now. What are we thinking about Aaron Jones in Minnesota?
I like him a lot, actually. I think he fits well because he's going to help out. I mean, I know we talk about Sam Darnold, that fun situation, but like whatever quarterback's going to be there, I don't think it's going to be Sam Darnold. I think it's probably going to be the round 1 rookie they end up taking, aka JJ McCarthy. If that slides, that'll happen. But yeah, I think he helps out whoever the the quarterback is there because he's a solid veteran running back who can do a little bit of everything. He's not your Derrick Henry. He's not going to get 20-25 touches a game. That's just no, he's never been. But, you know, he'll get some targets. He'll get some carries. He'll be an efficient player because we saw it in the back half of last year. The guy was a monster. He was one of the better running backs in fantasy. So you're bringing that into Minnesota and you're helping him out because the drop-off from Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold is freaking ginormous. So they need to figure out a way to make those weapons work because I put out a tweet about this earlier today. I am worried about the pass catchers in Minnesota this year. I think they're all going to take a substantial hit. So with Aaron Jones coming in, that takes another chip out of the room and touches as well. How do you see that play shaking out? Are you still in on the Minnesota pass catchers like Hawkinson and Addison, or are you kind of worried about those guys?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. I think this was, a few years ago when Brady left in free agency. I'm not going to sit here and compare Kirk Cousins to Tom Brady. But it was a significant move, right? And we were all, wondering, well, is it Brady or Belichick? Here, I think we're wondering, is it Kirk Cousins or is it JJ, right? Is it Justin Jefferson? Now, there's no denying that Justin Jefferson is a supreme talent, but you still need somebody to deliver him the football on time, in stride, to make sure that he can maximize his role in that offense, right? And so I think you're right. I think he's going to take a significant hit in terms of his yardage, in terms of his reception. The catchable targets are going to decrease, especially if you're talking about JJ McCarthy, especially if you're talking about Sam Darnold. These guys aren't going to come in and be world beaters. It's going to be a learning curve, certainly, for them. Now, a Kevin O'Connell offense is fantastic, right?
Mhm.
So we expect these guys to eventually be able to excel, but that learning curve is likely to be rough. Justin Jefferson, is he dynasty wide receiver 1 anymore? And if not, who do you have ahead of him?
I think he's so. I know I've seen people talking about he's a tier of his own. I was like, no, this was before the Kirk Cousins situation. I had him in the tier 1 with Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, and honestly, like I don't really have a difference if you prefer either one of those guys. What I do think is it pushes him back and start up like he goes to the back half of round 1 because he was going between 106 and 108, right? It's like, are you really going to take him over one of the premium quarterbacks right now, not knowing his situation with quarterbacks? And I mean, it could improve, but we have no idea how good JJ McCarthy is. He's not. However good he's going to be, it's not going to be as good as Kirk Cousins' offense was. So it takes a hit, right? And I know we talk about like these Hall of Fame wide receivers. The key is the majority of them had very good quarterback play supporting them. Or it's a DeAndre Hopkins situation in the Tom Savage corollary where he's just getting peppered with targets, where you get 1,500 yards, but like you're getting like a top 5 season. You're just not getting the wide receiver 1 overall. And I think that's the more difference from Jefferson. I think he's still going to have the super high floor because he's that talented of a player. But like it's just a lot harder for him to average over 20 points a game now. And this is the more discussion I think we need to have with Dynasty and these values shifting, right? So for me personally, like I'm fine with either one of those guys. Like I'll just take the cheapest of the group. So maybe you can get a plus on top and move back to Jefferson if people go crazy with it. I doubt they will, but it's just kind of something to like keep in mind when you're going in the drafts this year. Are you really going to spend a top 6 like redraft pick on Justin Jefferson? I'm not going to personally. I'll take him probably like the 1-2 turn in that range.
Yeah. And the other thing to consider too is Minnesota has dramatically turned over their defense even in the last couple of days. They paid big money for Jonathan Greenard, Blake Cashman at linebacker, Andrew Van Ginkel coming over. They lost Marcus Davenport. We're assuming that Danielle Hunter is leaving as well. But it's somewhat of an upgrade, right? And with Brian Flores there, right, it's very possible that Minnesota can, in this offseason here with the draft included, all of a sudden become a pretty decent to good NFL defensive unit. And if that's the case, they don't need to be thrown at the ball the way Kirk Cousins was 40, 45 times a game. They can scale that back. They will scale it back if it's Darnold or McCarthy. And then you're looking at, them likely bringing in another running back. I would imagine, a later round draft pick. And then, Aaron Jones gets 65%, Ty Chandler mixes in, and whoever else is coming in on a cheaper deal, and they're just going to pound the ball, right? So that is a bit of a concern as well for Justin Jefferson. Whereas if you look at his counterpart, Jamar Chase in Cincinnati, right? T. Higgins likely leaving, Joe Burrow back from injury. Remind me who's in the backfield, Zach Moss, right?
Sure.
Who is, I like Zach Moss, and we'll talk about him in a minute, but he's not necessarily Joe Mixon, or is at least it's at least a parallel move from Joe Mixon there. So you're not so concerned about the passing volume in Cincinnati. It could be, Jamar Chase wheels up and Justin Jefferson taking a couple of seats back.
Right. And then if you're talking redraft, you have Tyreek Hill, who was just absolute monster last year. Like he was head and shoulders with everybody else. And then CeeDee Lamb too. So it's like, it's interesting. I think the discussion revolves like, where do we fall? We'll figure it out. We'll get there. I just think right now he's just a little bit overvalued. Like if you're paying that premium for him, like I would just wait and like let the market settle. And I know people say like buy talent, not situation. It's just when it gets to this premium talent we're talking about, like you're spending a first round starter pick or the equivalent. That's the whole thing. It's like all these guys are elite. It's like it's just different varying levels of elite, right? It's like, all right, CeeDee Lamb, 20 points per game. Jamar Chase, 20 points per game. Justin Jefferson, 20 points. Is like they're all in that range, right? So why would you pay up for Jefferson if you can get one of those guys cheaper? So I think that's just the whole case we're making. He's still going to be very good. Like it's not like he's going to drop off and put up 12 points per game. He's too good for that. Yeah. But he could drop down to like, between 16 or 18 points per game. Maybe has some bad touchdown luck. Things happen, That's still a very good season, but when you're paying this premium for him, and like you talk about the passing volume, like they've had 37, 38 pass attempts per game. There's no way in hell with the JJ McCarthy offense they're passing at 37. It might be 32. So if you take 6 passes per game, like that, it just slowly just decreases the ceiling is more of that case. So yeah, that's my whole issue with it.
Yeah, and fantasy, we know consistency is king, right? So the inconsistency here is Kirk Cousins is gone. We don't know who's going to be in a quarterback, if it's Sam Darnold, if it's someone else, right? And we don't know how consistent they're going to be with Justin Jefferson. Maybe they develop a great rapport with Addison, right? Or Hawkinson when he's back. And maybe it just becomes a situation where JJ goes from I'm guessing here, 26% target share on his own team to maybe a 23%. Maybe he drops a couple of percentage points in his overall team target share. And that's really going to dramatically affect his bottom line. So you're going to see those mid-level wide receiver 1 numbers instead of those elite 1, 2 tops in the league level numbers. So it's just another consideration. Consistency is king in fantasy, and elite consistency is elite king is the kingiest.
Yeah, like with especially if you're playing with Sam Darnold, these guys that can't read defenses, the thing that happens is it's the inefficiency of the quarterback. So necessarily they'll hyper target your guy, and this is like what I was talking about DeAndre Hopkins when he had Tom Savage. He was getting 150 targets to get like a season. That was totally fine. It just was not super efficient, right? And that's more the problem. So like his target share could go up, but he could have a worse season because it's a worse quarterback throwing him. So it kind of cuts both ways, however you want to slice it. It's just at his cost of the 106 pick in startups and of like a top 3 like a redraft pick. I'm just gonna pass. Let other people take that risk.
But just to put a bow, because we talked about Justin Jefferson a lot here, put a bow on the Aaron Jones to Minnesota. Do we think it's a lateral move for his value? Do we think it's he moves up, down? Where do you have him now as opposed to what you were thinking about him in Green Bay?
Well, I think Green Bay was just a better situation with a better offense because of how they used him. It's the way it gets better is if you talk yourself into more volume for him. Like if his volume significantly increases, but like we've just never seen that from Aaron Jones. Like that's just never who he's been, right? Like his target share is never like it was like 10, 11% last year. It's good. It's just not elite. His total touches per game, same thing. Good, just not elite. So he has to be an efficiency king. And this is what he was with Aaron Rodgers a few years ago. He's touchdown monster, doing all those things. So I think with Minnesota, like he could probably be in, back end RB1. More than likely, he's like a middling RB2 for your teams.
Yep.
So I wouldn't get out over your skis with Aaron Jones. But like we talk about just of these cheap, like older running backs, and Aaron Jones is the older running back. You just find the cheapest of like a Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, James Conner. Who's the cheapest out of these guys? If there's no differential between them, it's like, why pay up for Aaron Jones when I can get James Conner for cheaper? Like, So I had an offer today of $207 for James Conner. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go see if I can get a cheaper back, like any one of those older guys, just for less than that. And that's just the best way to play the market because you don't have to zero out on one player because Aaron Jones isn't going to give you 20 points per game. That's just not who he is. That's who he hasn't been for a long time. So I think he's good, and I'm fine with him. Like he'll probably be like a 5th round redraft pick, and he's overall. But yeah, this is what we talk about. It's just know the market and like test the waters around everywhere else before you decide to settle.
Yep, totally agree. It's lateral, if not a negative move for him. We'll just have to see how the rest of it shakes out for Minnesota. A couple of more backs to discuss here, but less exciting backs. We'll save the quote-unquote best for last, and we'll talk first about Zach Moss. Moss moving from the Indianapolis Colts to the Cincinnati Bengals. Big move for him in terms of a much better offense considering all the injury that Indianapolis was dealing with last year. Not necessarily a better line, not necessarily a better run game here. So what are we thinking about Zach Moss and his move, especially now that Joe Mixon is out of the picture and really all he has to contend with is Chase Brown over there in Cincinnati?
Yeah, I like him. I think he's a solid running back. I know I put out a tweet yesterday. I was like, RB1 season. Like I just being a little sarcastic with it. But he's going to one of the better spots for running backs. We've seen it time and time again with Joe Mixon. And when he subbed in for Jonathan Taylor, he got the volume. And I think that's the most important thing we need to focus on is not the efficiency, but it's the team trusting the player with volume because that means they believe in the talent. Efficiency can fluctuate, and this is something we've always had issue with Joe Mixon. He's just never been really that efficient, but he's been able to earn volume. And then we have Chase Brown there. It's going to be pretty wild to see how it shakes out. I just think Zach Moss is the better back. So if I'm betting between the two, go with that. If you prefer Chase Brown, go bet on Chase Brown. It's totally fine. This is the time in the offseason where there's a lot of uncertainty with these guys, so you can get them for cheaper. So, if you want to target a guy at a discounted rate because we're uncertain, like you can go do that. I just would not pay the premium for either one of these guys until we get a little more clarity, right? Because if you pay an early second for Zach Moss and then he's not playing, like you just completely wasted that pick, right? So I would be careful like going out and getting these guys. But if I'm betting on the two of them, personally, it's Zach Moss for me, just because based on what he did last year, I think he's a very capable back. How do you see this? Like, do you see either one of these guys carving out a major role, or do you see them more just like a committee timeshare?
Yeah, I think it's a committee. I think, 80% of the backfields in the NFL at this point are a committee. So
Mhm.
it's not really a concern to me that he's playing in a committee. I want the 1A guy. I want the guy who's going to get the goal line touches.
Mhm.
That's going to be Zach Moss in Cincinnati, especially in a great offense. So I'll take my chance on him well over Chase Brown. The other thing to consider is he's just 26 years old. So this is a pretty good signing for both him and the team. He's basically, 90% Joe Mixon, at least based on what he showed last year. He's really been able to come on the last couple of years. We see Mixon in decline. We see Zach Moss kind of holding steady there.
Mhm.
So I'm very comfortable with him in this offense. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for him. We talked about this yesterday, to your point that you just made. We were talking about DeAndre Swift and why would the Bears go out and sign him? He's not a great pass protector, right? So what are they really gaining outside of a hyper athletic back in the backfield, right? That's great. But at some point, you need to make sure your quarterback stays upright so he can deliver the ball. Zach Moss offers that. He's not a phenomenal pass protector, but he's good enough. He's Joe Mixon level to the point where he can stand in and pass protect. He can sneak out and catch those screens, catch those checkdowns as well. We know Chase Brown can do that, but as a smaller back, he's not going to be nearly as effective back there. Now, Zach Moss is no gigantor back there. He's 5'9", 205, right? So he's not huge in his own right, but he's at least an NFL capable back. He can stand in there, pass protect. He can sneak out and get those extra receptions. And if you just look at his logs, he had a game with eight targets, 7 targets last season. So he's
Mhm.
capable of having those big games. And when he's able to string together the touches on the ground with the receptions, get in the end zone, he's going to have a monster RB1 week for you. And that should happen, 5-6 times a season if he's healthy, in addition to consistently, what would you say, mid to high RB2 level production?
Yeah, I think in the right game script and like the ideal scenario, because we saw a couple boom weeks from him last week where he had like a 28-point game, a 33-point game. Like he could hit in the right situation, in the right game script. It's just like my whole case for Zach Moss is he's cheaper than Joe Mixon and he gives you similar production, if not better production. So like for the Bengals, it's like, why pay the extra money for Joe Mixon? It's like, let's cut that, let's save some money. Just go get Zach Moss, who's going to replicate that production for cheaper. So it just makes a whole lot of sense because Joe Mixon, his case has always been volume. It's never really been like he's been an efficient good back. And you can talk yourself into like that is a talent situation, earning volume, because not everyone can do that. We talk about this with James Cook and those guys. It's like they can't really get the volume they're looking for. So I think Joe Mixon offers that at the very least. Like what you're getting. But yeah, Zach Moss, you're getting a guy going into one of the best like fantasy situations possible. If either him or Chase Brown carve out that like a 60 to 70% opportunity share in that, like that's wheels up. You're getting 15 points per game at least. And that's like, that'll move the needle for you. So like I definitely like that. And I think it works out well for the Bengals to go this route with Zach Moss. Like you're taking a gamble. It doesn't cost you much of anything. And then it's funny how like the Cowboys were like $4 million is too much. I think they got some PTSD going on from that Ezekiel contract.
They definitely do. But that's all self-inflicted in Dallas over there.
Right.
But to your point, Zach Moss so far, with all the contract information that's come in, is the 3rd cheapest free agent running back, in front of Antonio Gibson, who made $3.75 million a year, Gus Edwards, who made $3.25 a year. So he's the 3rd cheapest so far, which, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for production at value, especially at the running back position. And that's exactly what the Bengals got. Another team who got it with the running back who's now making the 4th fewest dollars in free agency. But number 1 in our hearts for sure is Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler now is a Washington Commander, moving on from the Los Angeles Chargers. He was offered was it 1 year? No, thankfully it was 2 years for Austin Ekeler, $8.3 million. So just over $4 million a year for his services. We saw last season it was a concern. There was a bit of a decline there in his production. Was injury all to blame for that? Was some of that scheme and other concerns for the team, the fact that they were, ultimately didn't make the playoffs? Was there dissent in the locker room? We saw all the coaches, Brandon Staley and company were jettisoned. I think Staley, did he even leave before the end of the season there in Los Angeles?
Yeah. That Staley stuff was just a disaster, man. It's just so bad.
Remember. I think so. But yeah, that Los Angeles Chargers team was a wreck. They're coming in and cleaning house there this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are we thinking about Austin Ekeler in 2024? Does he still have 85, 90% of what he was, or has he fallen off the cliff? And how's he going to fit in Washington?
So yeah, last year was his stats dramatically just fell off the cliff, and he had that week 1 injury with the high ankle sprain. And high ankle sprain, if you remember, this was the thing that killed Saquon Barkley a couple years ago. Came back and it was just like it was over after that. He rolled his ankle, the season was pretty much done. He was just walking. So, and we saw the video. Everybody's seen it. Eckler looking like a grandpa running down the sideline, going with 13 miles an hour, where it's just no speed. So the funny thing is, he was like they did week 1 before he got injured. He was running 19 miles an hour. So like. He obviously still has speed. Like I don't think he doesn't have a high end like burn away. They get 80 yards of the house, but he's fast enough. I think he's fine. It's just a lot of things worked against him, and that offense just had no explosive players last year. They like Keenan Allen's not an explosive player. Austin Eckler's not an explosive player. Mike Williams is out for the year. Like so it's just like the offense. You watched it, and it was just like everything's running in slow motion. You're like, goodness gracious, this is terrible. They can't do anything right because. If you don't have speed, it just gets a lot harder. And I mean, Keenan Allen's still a very good player, but speed's never been his game, to tell you the truth. Yeah. So yeah, him going to Washington, I think, is very interesting because Brian Robinson would be considered a plotter by many people in the league. Like you watch Brian Robinson, you're like, all right, he's not explosive. He's not. So there is a scenario where you talk yourself into Eckler being the guy there. And I mean, it's all cost related. If like I saw someone throw out like a late 3rd round pick, they got Austin Eckler at that cost. I'm like, sure, what's it going to cost you, right? So if I think people are still pretty out on him. So if you want to target him over Brian Robinson, who personally, like, I think he's just kind of just meh. And Austin Eckler still, worst case, offers you passing production. Like that's what he does, right? He's always been good at that. So I think he could do a similar to what Ezekiel Elliott did a few years ago, where he just puts up an ugly season, but we look back and he's like the RB10 at the end of the year. Yeah. Like he can totally talk yourself about, because it's going to be Drake May or Jane Daniels, and the running back is always the best friend of a rookie quarterback. So like that situation, you can work it out there, and they have good players there. So like they don't have to depend on Eckler so heavily. So I think the lighter usage is what he's wanted his entire career. He's finally getting that again. Like they're not so dependent on him, and he's going to be the PPR guy there. So like I'll talk myself into it. Like I still have a soft spot for Eckler. What about you? Are you at all interested in Eckler, or are you just like throwing in the towel and just say he's like sayonara?
No, I'm definitely interested. I do buy a bit of the narrative that I was spinning a couple of minutes ago about, the fact that LA was just in shambles as an organization and they cleaned house. The fact that, as you mentioned, he had that injury and never fully recovered, and sapped some of his strength and explosiveness. Let me ask you this question, though. So Eckler missed 3 full games last season. So he played in, let's do some quick math, 14 games last season. How do you think he finished on the year among running backs? PPR running back number.
Oh gosh, it was gross. Like per game or end of the year?
End of the year.
He's probably like RB 21 or something would be my guess.
Not bad. 26, right?
Ooh,
so, but if you think about that, right, he's still borderline RB2 numbers, missing 3 games and looking as bad as he did with while dealing with injury, while dealing with Kellen Moore and whatever the heck was going on, Brandon Staley, whatever the heck was going on over there in LA. But he's coming to Washington, and Washington has their own turnover and turmoil, right? Sam Howell right now is the quarterback, unless it's Marcus Mariota, who's just signed over there, which I don't know. That's a toss up to me. Who's better if they don't draft somebody at 2 here, but they should. But then, so you likely have a rookie quarterback coming in, but then at the same time, you have a Cliff Kingsbury coming in, right? And we're all huge fans of Cliff Kingsbury from his time in Arizona. I think the most impressive thing about Cliff Kingsbury's time in Arizona was the house that he drafted from during COVID. But we've all seen the route tree that DeAndre Hopkins was, the route bush that Kingsbury had him running. He doesn't have a much better quarterback than he had in Kyler Murray. I don't know that Jaden Daniels or Drake May is going to come in and light it on fire right away. So do we have high expectations here for Eckler now inserted into a Cliff Kingsbury offense? We know they have passing game weapons, but like who's running the show here and what can he really produce, especially behind or in tandem with Brian Robinson?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of negative game scripts in Washington this year. Like it's a rebuild. It's year 1. You know who that helps? That helps out the pass catching running back. So like the more I think about it, the more I prefer Eckler to Brian Robinson. I mean, Brian Robinson completely just bodied Antonio Gibson out of the picture last year and the year before. So like congrats to him on doing that, because obviously it looks like, I think I saw a tweet where someone said, watching the two players, it looks like Austin Eckler was the one shot in the leg last year, not Brett Robinson. And I was like, you know what? But like he still averaged 4.6 yards per touch, which was basically what Joe Mixon's done his entire career, Austin Eckler. So that shows you like the difference in pass catching and like what Austin Eckler does. It's easier to get yardage, right? Because he's a pass catcher. But yeah, it's, you can't really be like, oh yeah, Austin Eckler RB1, like, and you can't have full confidence in that just because you don't know how much work he's going to get. The offense is probably going to struggle. But like where it started out last year, it was just super high passing volume and a lot of inefficiencies. So we can correct that with whatever rookie comes in. Like it's more than likely going to be better than what they were throwing out with Sam Howell. We saw Terry McLaurin reborn with Jacoby Brissett when he was playing, right? All of a sudden we're like, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. Amazing. So I think whatever rookie offers them a chance to give Washington a much better, more efficient offense, even if it's less volume in general. But yeah, they could be in a lot of negative game scripts. So like this is when we talk about Austin Eckler, this is the way he succeeds in Washington.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. The only pushback I'll offer to that is let's assume it's Daniels or May, right? It's probably not going to be anyone else. Caleb is going number 1, no matter where he goes, but likely Chicago unless they trade it. So Daniels or May, these are running quarterbacks, right? These are not check down artists. So that for me is going to, even if they learn how to run a 2-minute drill, and Austin Eckler is at 4-minute drill, and Austin Eckler is out there, they're way behind. I'm not super confident that those guys aren't just going to take off and run at the first sign of trouble, instead of, looking for Eckler out of the backfield or Zach Ertz, in the flat there. So that's my one concern with it is, like you mentioned, Brian Robinson is good enough to command touches right out of the backfield. And then Austin Eckler, if he's the 1B in terms of touches, even if he's more efficient with it, great. But if he's not getting those checkdowns, I mean, it's not Justin Herbert back there, right? So that's really my one concern there.
Yeah, I think Drake May is a better option for that if you're talking yourself into it because he more like looks to still find the open play where Jaden Daniels is literally just taking off the running. Like he's literally going for the run every time. So I think if you want to talk to like who's the better option between the two, I think it's Drake May, and he has the higher, like the longer pedigree of being a good passer. So there's that on top of it. But yeah, like it's not like he's gonna get 100 targets. No one's saying anything like that, but you could find a scenario where he gets like 50 to 60 targets, in the situation like this, and it works out okay for you. But yeah, this is what we get into. It's just really hard for him to get into this like the high end range of running backs. Like that just seems like that's gone at this point for him.
Yeah, totally agree. We do have one more running back to discuss, unless there's news that broke in the last 20 minutes. I don't think so. But it is Joseph Mixon leaving Cincinnati, traded for a 7th round pick. I'm going to say that again. He was traded for a 7th round pick. That's the last pick of the draft, folks, to the Houston Texans. Wow.
Yeah.
Jesse, talk to me.
Hey, you want to talk yourself into one of the better running back situations we go. And it's a CJ Stroud offense. And I get it. We like Singletary, but like he's never able to earn volume the way Joe Mixon was. So realistically, I'm not worried about Dameon Pierce. Like he does not fit there at all. I think maybe they trade him at some point. But yeah, it's Joe Mixon's backfield. So the only way it's not is if they draft someone and then like a running back in, day 2 or whatever. And maybe they do that. And then maybe it becomes a committee. But as it stands right now, I think now everyone's excited about Joe Mixon. In Dynasty, this is exactly the moment you sell him. Like you're literally like, all right, he's the lead running back in a great offense. Cool. Well, now we sell him.
According to Sleeper, he's not the lead running back in the offense.
Oh my gosh. Well, Dameon Pierce, get out of here, man.
Come on, Sleeper, get on top of it.
But yeah, like you could spin the wheels where you send him for like early second, maybe you add on to get that late 1st round pick, you move off of him, and that's how you get out of Joe Mixon.
Yeah. Because
it's very much like Austin Eckler. Like when it goes and when people haven't had really interest in Mixon for a long time. So this value spike is what you take advantage of because he's going in like the 10th round of startups, right? Like he doesn't have any dynasty value, it's just strictly production. And now he's in, frankly, even in a possibly better offense than he was in Cincinnati. But yeah, like Joe Mixon's just living right because he's had Joe Burrow and now he gets CJ Stroud as quarterback. So it's like, all right, these are 2 of the better offenses in the NFL. So yeah, on the flip side, if you want to go get it, like, I don't blame you at all. If he's cheaper than Henry, if he's cheaper than Jones, and somebody doesn't give you the value bump, then go pay for him. It's all market value with Dynasty, and I think he will be fine. I think he's going to produce. I don't think he's going to be a high-end RB1 just because he's not that efficient. But overall, he's going to get over 250. Like opportunities. That's who Joe Mixon is. So being in that offense, we saw what Singletary did last year, and these other running backs, you can succeed. So yeah, I think he'll be fine for fantasy. This was probably the last like boom window to get rid of Joe Mixon though. So like,
Yep.
you know.
And even more important to note is that Houston lost a couple of key defensive pieces already in free agency, right? That defense is likely to be a little bit worse, but I think they're going to do what they can. But that helps us for fantasy purposes, right? We also know that they re-signed Noah Brown. That's a huge plus for this team, I think, as a dependable wide receiver 3, just to kind of keep the chains moving. Dalton Schultz is back, right? So we're getting the band back together, and we're adding in a better running back, even if he's declining. And then you look at the running back depth chart behind Mixon. We already mentioned Pierce. Don't worry though, you got JJ Taylor and Jared Dokes back there. And we have 2 fullbacks on the squad, 2. So I don't know what we're doing here in Houston. Look, I'm pretty convinced here because I'm looking at the picks that they've got. They've got the 23rd overall that's in the first round. They've got a second. They've got a third and 2 fourths. I'm pretty convinced they're going to bring in a rookie running back. Now, I don't think that's really going to hurt Mixon, at least for this season. But it's at least a consideration here in Houston with all their weapons, with the fact that they can rely on CJ Stroud to move the football and generate offense. Can Mixon do better than Singletary did at his advanced age?
I mean, I think he can. Like, yeah. I like Singletary what he did, but like he wasn't, a true difference maker in the running back position. I think like Joe Mixon is going to be at worst case a back end RB1. And who knows, maybe it all falls off a cliff this year for Mixon, and like we did with Ekeler last year, where it's just like, well, he doesn't have it. But like he really didn't. It's not really diminished. He never really hit the highs we're looking for. Like all of his efficiency numbers are all very in a similar range each year. He just kind of just hovers around there, a guy that can get volume, and it's, you do with that what you do. So I think maybe it falls apart, and it's the hard power running backs when it goes, it goes. But I think he's just an ugly back end RB1 where people are like, oh, Joe Mixon, but then they're like, ooh, that offense. So you have this like, the thought process is divergent on the two of them. It's like, do I invest in the running back because of the offense, or do I just invest in the running back and hope it works out? So yeah, you can tell I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Mixon in the world, but like he earns volume and that's important. So like he will produce in the worst case.
Yeah, agree. Devin Singletary last season had 6 games where he had 75% snap share or greater. In 5 of those games, he had at least 22 carries and at least 3 targets. So, I mean, look, I think they're going to feed Joe Mixon until the wheels come off. Dameon Pierce will get in there some. They'll probably have a rookie learn the ropes there because Mixon's not long for the NFL. All of that said, it's going to be a good situation for Joe Mixon. All of that said, trade him as soon as you possibly can, like Jesse mentioned earlier.
Yeah, right. I mean, the last 2 years, he's had 75 targets and 64 targets. Like, he gets targets. He finds ways to get there. It's just, he's not a high-end targeter. You'll probably put him down for 50 targets. I'm curious to see, like, if his targets fluctuate a lot. But overall, as long as he's getting the 60+% opportunity share on that offense, it'll be fine. The volume will be there. He'll produce for you. It's just, it's one of those where you really just don't want to watch it. You just want to look at the box score at the end of the day. 15 fantasy points, cool. All right. If you watch it, you're gonna pull your hair out.
Yeah, that's it. Just collect your winnings like this. All the other running backs who signed in free agency that matter, right? I'm not talking about Nyheim Hines or Dearness Johnson, Chase Edmonds, but we're talking about Jacobs, Barkley, Pollard, Swift, Singletary. If you want to hear all of our breakdowns of those guys, we talked about them yesterday. That I believe is available on our YouTube, and if not, is all over Twitter. So you can find it pretty easily and on our website, fantasyfootballuniverse.com. But for now, at least, that's the end of our running back discussion. We're going to pivot a little bit and we're going to look at quarterbacks for a brief second because not much has been going on outside of Kirk Cousins. The biggest one, though, there's a couple that have starting implications, right? We talked about Cousins yesterday. We talked about Russell Wilson. Today, we're going to talk about 2 other big names in the NFL quarterback market, Gardner Minshew and Jacoby Brissett. Jesse, let's talk about Gardner Minshew first. Coming over to the Las Vegas Raiders, we thought that this could be a position for a potential Justin Fields landing spot. That's likely out the window now, even though it's still possible. But Gardner Minshew is good enough to command a terrible offense, in Las Vegas. He commanded a decent one in Indianapolis last season. So what are you thinking here with Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer? Okay, yeah. And then Zamir White or whoever they bring in. They got to bring in some more guys here. But can Minshew be the guy? And if he is the guy, can he be, a capable super flex weekly starter as a QB2 for you?
That's going to fluctuate. I don't have 100% confidence in that, but you saw kind of in Indianapolis, which the scheme is better. So we might want to pump the brakes on, Minshew just replicating those numbers in Vegas.
Yep.
But I will say, to spin it positively for Minshew, it's the pass catchers and it's Davante Adams that I have confidence in now, that because it's a guy that can feed them targets. And he just gave Pittman 150 targets and made him a wide receiver one, right?
Yeah,
like
true.
He did that with him. So you're going into and I mean, we like Pittman a lot. I still think Adams is a better wide receiver. I still think Adams is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. He's just very complete. So what you're doing is you're getting Adams the chance to hit a high end ceiling because you're giving him a guy that can just absolutely pepper him the ball. And it might hurt the rest of the guys in that offense. I'm not super thrilled about Michael Mayer. Not super thrilled about Jacoby Myers. I think they can do some things for you. Have flex play every now and often, but Adams is still that good of a wide receiver where he had 175 targets last year. He was a target king. And I just think the efficiency increases a little bit. So if you want to go out and buy a veteran wide receiver on the cheap, I think Davante Adams is 1-2 target because he still has the stench from last year where people are just oh man, it just was not great. Right. So I think he's the guy of all those people in the Raiders offense that if I'm targeting one dude in that offense, it's him. But yeah, I think Minshew in the right matchup can give you some fantasy points. We saw it last year. I think he can do the same thing. So for his sake, it's I looked at his contract. It's top 20. He's the 20th high paid quarterbacks. I know people said his backup money. No, that's borderline starter money. That's more than backup money. So they actually have confidence in him because otherwise they would have given him a Justin Fields $6 million, right? So no, they gave this dude $25 million with $15 million guaranteed. They trust him enough for this year, and this is all we're looking for, right? Yeah. So we're not looking for long term. This is the cycle through. We did this with Baker last year. Gino the year before. It's you invest in these cheap quarterbacks, and they can produce some level for you. I don't think Minshew's going to give you that production just because the arm talent's not there and things of that nature. He's a little inconsistent, but yeah, he can be a streamable QB2 depending on the matchup phrase. The best way I will phrase it. Are you willing to roster him as a QB3 on your team, or are you just kind of just getting him as dart throwing deals?
Yeah, I'm not going to pursue him if he's available on waivers, which is unlikely unless you're in a fairly shallow dynasty league. I'll scoop him up for sure. Otherwise, no, I'm not chasing him or his production. I don't think he's that much better than Aiden O'Connell was last season. He's got a much better look to him. I mean, listen, for media purposes, Gardner Minshew in Las Vegas is just phenomenal, right? You just got, a picture of Minshew on the strip, full Fu Manchu, short shorts, American flag bandana, and just repping the NFL from Vegas on the strip, fantastic, right? But Gardner Minshew in reality is not really going to move the needle. Let me ask you this question, because you mentioned Davante Adams and his production last season. With the revolving door of Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell, and there was definitely another starter or two in there, which I've forgotten, and
don't worry about it.
It doesn't matter. But the question to you is, how many targets do you think Davante Adams earned last season, and where did he finish as a PPR wide receiver?
So I did say he had 175 targets last year.
Yep.
I actually don't know his production. I know I think he was second in the NFL in targets. As far as his points per game in total, I actually don't know. I think he was was it 13? No, I'm talking out my ass. I actually don't remember now that
it's close. He's PPR wide receiver 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So still a back end wide receiver 1 with all of the turmoil, with Josh McDaniels getting just totally, kicked out the door. He was DJ Jazzy Jeffed out the door in Vegas, by the Davises there. But yeah, Davante Adams, with all that turmoil, with how outspoken he was in Vegas, he still finished, like you said, with 175 targets, 103 receptions, 1,144 yards, and 8 touchdowns, right? Still elite production. Now, if you have a solidifying force, a quarterback like Gardner Minshew can be, or if Aiden O'Connell beats him out, which is possible, takes a step right, and can continue that rapport, either way, it's good for Devontae Adams. So I like the stability there. And it's probably even better than bringing in a rookie QB, certainly better probably than bringing in a Justin Fields, right, for Devontae Adams to deal with. But also, if you think about it, 103 receptions, 175 targets, right? That's not really ideal. We're not
No,
exactly playing with Aaron Rodgers anymore. So,
no.
but he's doing his best to soak up that volume and to produce. But let's talk more about Gardner Minshew. Commanded a pretty decent offense in Indianapolis last year. In fact, let's just take a look at him. He finished as the QB 21, which isn't exactly great, but of course, Anthony Richardson started the season over there, right? He kind of took over the helm after week 6 officially, with Richardson battling those shoulder injuries back and forth. And from that point on, he produced decently, unless he was facing some stiff competition. But I don't know, QB 21 with almost a full season under his belt, only 15 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. I don't know. Is he able to be that guy like we're talking about as a QB2, or is he someone we're like, oh, he's a starter now, just sell him as soon as possible?
Oh yeah, if I can get out from him, I'll happily do that. Like if
What would you
someone's
take?
desperate, oh yeah, I would search for any second possible to get rid of him. But like realistically, instead of a 3rd round pick, what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to package him up into something else or move him for a positional player. So somebody who's a wide receiver. Like I'm looking at his value right now. If we're talking about Minshew, he's way down here. He's with the Darnell Mooney, he's with the Jaleel McLaughlin, he's with the Adam Thielens, the Mac Jones of the world. It's a late 3rd round pick. So he's worth basically nothing. So you have to basically find someone who's desperate and buying into it. So I think the best way to do that is in season when someone gets injured. And that's it's really hard unless you want to throw him in as like a kicker in a deal. Like that's the other way, right? Otherwise, you just ride him out and go with that because, I mean, who's going to pay a second for him? Like, what? I guess better way to phrase it is why would you do that? Here, I'm going to pull up this question real quick because I guess we got one.
Sure.
All right. So let me know what you're doing with Derrick Henry. Are you holding him? Are you trading him or are you buying him?
He's definitely at least a hold for me, but I would buy him. I mean, I think like we talked about, that Tennessee offensive line last year was just struggling. Was it Taylor Lewan? It was one of those offensive linemen who retired like just before the season started in Tennessee. I think it might have been Lewan. And then I believe they had another injury on the line. It was a disaster there in Tennessee in terms of what we was working with up front. The line in Baltimore is pretty decent, but it doesn't matter because Lamar Jackson is just creating those holes by the nature of him being there. Most NFL teams will spy Lamar Jackson. If they're smart. It actually worked in the playoffs this year against him, and it's what ultimately shut them down. I think who beat them? It wasn't the Chiefs, right? It was
Chiefs.
Was the Chiefs. I think they had Bolton spying him for a majority of that game. And, in key moments. So, NFL teams are going to figure that out. They're going to figure out how to contain him, but they didn't have to account for a monster running back in the backfield. So for me, like, I'm buying in on Derrick Henry because we know Derrick Henry can run around you. We know he can run over you. He's lost a step. It doesn't matter. I'm right there with you, Jesse. I think you said 1,500 yards on the ground. He's going to dominate, and I'll buy him.
Yeah, I'm looking at now. Gus Edwards had the 2nd highest stacked rate in the NFL for his carries, and he averaged 7.2 defenders in the box. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? It's just the guys are in the box, but also focusing on Lamar, so the holes open up a little easier. So it kind of cuts both ways, like you're talking. The difference is Derrick Henry's just better running back. I think that's what it comes down to, right? You're taking with that scheme, and I know they switched it up. They went to the Todd Monken offense. Still a very good offense last year. Like they did a lot of great things. Like Lamar won the MVP, so obviously it was a good season. It faltered at the end, but you're bringing in a running back who takes it to the next level. And this is what we were hoping to get out of J.K. Dobbins, but unfortunately, Matt Man just can't stay right and stay healthy. So we never got it. And we're getting it with the King, who's the guy he just feels like he's eternal. It's just another season of Derrick Henry. Like, don't worry about it. He's going to be an RB1. Like, you just lock it in. And, in this offense, as long as Lamar doesn't take all the rushing touchdowns, which, he might take a few, but it's not Jalen Hurts where you get down to the one and it's going to go to Lamar. Those will go to Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry is a massive human like Jalen Hurts, right? Yeah. So he's gonna it's setting up very well for him. So if like I see right now in Dynasty Data Lab, he's going at the 205. I'm fine sending the 205 to Derrick Henry. Like if I'm choosing between him and Mixon or any one of those guys, I'd prefer Henry because I think the ceiling is higher for Henry than those guys just based on the player he is and the situation he's in. He's not going to get the carries, but he's never gotten the carries. So like that's just we know that going in. Like he can give you 20 to 30 catches on season. I'll happily take that from Henry and you go from there. Even if it's down to 10, that's really not the selling point with him. It's the yards, right?
In terms of a rookie pick, what are you willing to send for Henry? What do you think you would send that would get accepted?
So I think it has to be a very like strict circumstance of a team. Like I'm not buying him unless I'm a contender because the thing with Henry is you're not going to be able to resell him, right?
Yep.
Like that's what you have to do. Like you buy him into the season. Maybe if he's still hitting throughout the year and like your team struggles, then you could kind of flip him for what you sold him for. But yeah, I personally, you might have to pay an early first. I don't want to get into that ball game. That's a little too steep for me. But my cutoff was probably like 202-ish range. But I need to be a certified contender. Like I need another veteran running back. Like everything else is set up. I got the wide receiver room, quarterback room, tight end room. Everything's good. It's just like I'm looking at my running back room. It's like Kamara. You have like maybe you have like Gibbs, and then you have just ancillary pieces, right? Where you need another running back in there. It's like all right, cool. I will go invest in Derrick Henry in that situation. That's fine. Yep. And on the flip side, if you have a team that's not competitive, just go sell this man immediately. Get out from him and you get rid of any risk associated with injury because if he does get injured, can't sell him for anything. Like people are gonna be like, they're not gonna want him at all. So like that's the kind of circumstance you have to take. So if you're buying him, know that going in, like injury happens, the value's done. So It is what it is. But yeah, like a mid-second is totally fine with me. And the hype will still build around the rookie class. Like we'll get, right to NFL draft day, we'll get those players settling in and people will be like, oh yeah, that 204 looks really nice. It's like, all right, cool. If I'm a contender, just give me Derrick Henry. I'll write it out and we'll do that. So yeah, that would be my plan for Derrick Henry personally.
Yeah, totally agree. And, especially right now with the hype on Derrick Henry, you're trying to get those 2024 draft picks, rookie picks, might not be possible. A good move is to look to 2025. If you can get a 2025 second, great. If you can try and convince a contender to give you their 2025 first, maybe you throw a second or a third on top just to get that first round pick. It's possible if someone believes that they're running back away. So, don't be afraid to try these moves. The worst they can do is say no. But eventually at some point, assuming he stays healthy, somebody's going to come calling for Derrick Henry because he is set to dominate in Baltimore if he can just, stay on the field.
Yeah, push it to 2026 if you can't get 2025.
That's it.
The value, like people diminish it, it doesn't matter. It's still there. Like I'm looking at trades right now. People were sending 2/3 for Derrick Henry. They were sending like Will Levis and Keenan Allen for Derrick Henry in a third. Like the value is still like he was not super valued. There is a first on here. Somebody gave him 2025 first.
Yep.
I don't know why they did that, but maybe that's just people love Henry. But you're seeing deals of like Henry, Keenan Allen, and a 25 first for a 24 first. So like obviously they're packaging situations like that. Sure. You could find ways to do that where you kick the first back a year. Maybe it's earlier first, and you get pieces to kick in with it. So like there's ways to work these values out if you want to do it.
Totally agree. Let's run back into quarterbacks. Not too much left to discuss here. We talked about Marcus Mariota enough. I don't think we need to discuss him as a backup in Washington. He's a potential starter. He's got some weapons, but they're going to bring in a rookie quarterback, so we'll skip him. Jacoby Brissett is interesting because we think the Patriots are going to bring in a rookie quarterback. We think they're going to sign Calvin Ridley. Those things probably shouldn't happen with how far out the Patriots are. Do you think Brissett has the opportunity to start for a full season, especially if you got a guy like Jaden Daniels or Drake Mason behind him? And if so, what sort of fantasy value can we expect?
That's going to be a tough one because the skill position players there are not good. It's not great. I mean, ideally, if you're doing this, like maybe they get another wide receiver. We're talking about Calvin Ridley, but it seems like he's yo-yoing between them and the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are just waiting a day to sign him, and then they're going to pay that. So Patriots might need to pay that money. It's like, go get him now while you still can. But yeah, it's going to be tough. He's never been a high-end fantasy producer. Like he's more in that Minshew range. Like he can have some games where he can give you between, like 10, 15 points. If he has a good game, maybe he'll push to 20, but you know what you're getting from him. Like he could be the starter in that whole situation. I just don't know how viable him starting in New England is going to be for fantasy, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Like that situation worries me pretty much more than anywhere else. That offense is like, I need to see some things change But yeah, he's like, he could be available for free basically in waivers if you want to pick him up or throw him for a fourth or fifth round pick, sure. Because those picks held no value to me. So if you want to do that, yeah, go for it. But if we're like getting the early thirds, like I'll just take gamble with the early third over Jacoby Brissett.
Oh yeah, totally agree. And something to keep in mind. I mean, we think about Jacoby Brissett as this big-bodied guy who can, push the pile into the end zone as a runner. His most productive rushing season was way back in his second season, which I believe he started every game for the Indianapolis Colts. In that season, he ran 63 times for 260 yards and 4 touchdowns. His most productive rushing season when he was a young buck. So Jacoby Brissett at age 31 right now is not going to come close to replicating those numbers. He's not really a rushing threat, but more importantly, not a threat to score touchdowns on the ground. And the most TDs he's ever thrown in a full season was not that season, was a season he didn't start the entire one, and he threw 18 touchdowns as opposed to 13. So look, Jacoby Brissett is not that guy. I'd much rather have a Gardner Minshew, especially with the weapons he has, than Jacoby Brissett in his situation if he ends up starting for the New England Patriots. So I think we can just kind of move on quickly. Not too much left to talk about. Drew Lock, now a New York Giant. He has the potential to start over Daniel Jones, but who cares, right? Like, what are we saying here? If you have Daniel Jones, maybe you're a little concerned, but as far as Drew Lock's fantasy value is concerned, it's still dead in the water, right?
Yeah, trust me. I've seen Drew Lock as being a Seahawks fan.
Yeah.
It's not good, friends. Like, there's the meme going around where it's like Drew Lock's doing the thing, and I'm like, that's great for the Seahawks beating the Eagles, but as an NFL quarterback, he trusts it. He's like Brett Favre, but a much worse version of Brett Favre. He's a gunslinger that trusts his arm too much, and his arm's not accurate, and it just creates massive problems for an offense. So you see it, like, he could have some games where it works out. I think he did pretty well against, I can't remember what team it was, but he played pretty well against one other team last year besides Philadelphia. But yeah, it's just those low games are just ridiculously bad. So yeah, it's just no, thank you. I'm good on the Drew Lock experience.
Leave him on the waiver wire or whatever sad sack got stuck with him on their dynasty roster. That's for sure. Just interesting points of note here, but nothing we're really going to talk about. Tyrod Taylor going from the Giants to the Jets. That's kind of interesting because Aaron Rodgers, who knows what's going on with his health and long-term viability in the league. Maybe Tyrod only 34 and a half years old. Maybe he gets a year or two of starter, level work down the road. Who knows? We also have Jameis Winston, who's now in the Cleveland Browns, which could become interesting because we know for fantasy, Jameis is really exciting. For reality, he's a disaster just in terms of the amount of YOLO balls he throws up. But he's at least interesting behind Deshaun Watson. But the guy I want to talk about first is Sam Darnold. All right. Sam Darnold in Minnesota. I mean, what is Minnesota doing here? They pretty much have to trade up for a rookie at this point, right? You can't let Sam Darnold start 17 games for you.
No. And I mean, this is people buying into the KOC offense, the Kevin O'Connell offense, right? Yeah. Kind of similar to what we were talking about with San Francisco last year. It's like, oh, even Sam Darnold could produce in that offense. And it's like, I mean, kind of. It's like, kind of, right? You're just getting significantly worse production. So, like, I get it. We like the offense and all those pieces they have, but, like, the floor and the ceiling both come down. Like, that's how it works out with Sam Darnold. He's going to be turnover prone. He's I think Sharp or Hart has put it out, like, the most percentage of inaccurate balls, I think, in the last couple of years, he's 37 out of 38 ranked quarterbacks. Like, he's just not throwing an accurate catcherable ball. So, like, that going in. So he's just going to piss off Justin Jefferson is what's going to happen. And, like, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to ruin the prize possession there. So I think that would be a gross miscalculation of assets for Minnesota to make Sam Darnold a starter. Like, I get it. He's got that, high-end draft capital, but he's clearly not that good. And it's just, it's like you just have him as a backup. And I think with these Superflex guys, they all pop. Like we saw this last year, guys like Andrew Pop. You want to roster them on, like, just roster them and see if you can sell them for anything. Like, that's the best way to make the easiest buck in Superflex leagues because quarterbacks. So if you have Drew Lock, you have Sam Darnold, whenever injuries pop and somebody needs a quarterback for a week, you're like, all right, just give me a third-round pick. And then you go and you just move it on. Like, you just do that every time. And that's how you generate a profit. But it's really hard to get more than that for these guys unless they're starting like a Josh Dobbs where it's multiple games and it starts kicking and he rolls through. But then what happens? The house comes crashing down and it's like, I'm stuck with nothing. So yeah, you just have to be careful with these guys.
Yeah, even with the Daniel Jones, who we thought was relatively safe given his contract, he's just been so bad, right?
Mhm.
That, he's a risky asset right now and is unlikely to keep his job long term. We saw it happen with Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett just last year, right? These guys are being given less and less time. More and more quarterbacks are talented and relatively pro ready as they come into the league. And we're just going to see that multiply, especially this year. We have the potential for 6 pro-ready quarterbacks to come in, maybe another one who just, wows us like a Brock Purdy in the later rounds. We're probably going to have a couple of those guys bust. But if you're saying that, 3 or 4 of those quarterbacks become long-term starters or starters in the next couple of years, right? That's just knocking down the pool of these Daniel Jones types who are destined for backup roles as in the NFL.
Yeah, I think like Daniel Jones could give you fantasy production. So like in the short term, if you want to go get him for cheap, because like I don't think he's losing the job there. I think he's going to be the starter if that's the way that scenario plays out. And maybe they go to get JJ McCarthy. Maybe that happens. But like, if he's there starting, he's going to give you fantasy points. You just have to view these guys in 1-year windows. Like the security's not there. And this is the whole Justin Fields thing, right? So wherever Justin Fields ends up, he gets 1 year to prove it. And if he craps out this last year, like he's not going to be starting again. People are going to be like, all right, we're done with you. And this is why teams aren't offering a second round pick for him, because they're like, you know what? Why? We don't need to do that. Like, we know you guys are screwed. You have to do it for us. So I mean, if you want to get Fields at some point later, sure. But like in the meantime, don't pay a premium for any one of these guys. You just go find the cheapest one. And who's ever going to give you that rushing production like Jones does, cool. But you just have to be aware when it falls apart, it absolutely crumbles.
For quarterbacks, let's just stay on Justin Fields for just a second. How does this play out? We talked about Minshew to the Raiders. That felt like a lock until Minshew signed. Is there a place now for Justin Fields to walk in and be assured the starting role? And if not, what happens? Does he sit? Do the Bears just eat it? Draft Caleb Williams and, make Justin Fields their backup? Do they, just draft Williams and look to trade whoever has the most interest? Do they sell the 101 pick for a haul and build around Fields, which at this point, with all the chatter, seems like it would be a disaster for Chicago? What the hell do they do? And what happens to Fields?
Yeah, like you're starting to look around the jobs in the league, and it's like, all right, well, the Raiders just paid Gardner Minshew decent money. I mean, maybe they go get Fields, but like, why would you pay Gardner Minshew all this money if then you're going to go get Fields, right? Yeah. So it's basically Minnesota or bust is what it feels like at this point, because there's nowhere else for really him to go where it's confident. And maybe I'm missing a team off the top of my head.
Denver.
Oh yeah, Denver would be the other team too. But he feels like the opposite of a Sean Payton quarterback, right? Like I feel like he would draw Sean Payton up a wall.
Agreed.
And it's like we saw last year with Russell Wilson. Like, you gonna bring in Justin Fields in that situation? Like, I don't think you want to do that. So yeah, it's those two spots. And if he doesn't land there, like this is what we talked about. Like the market's just not there. And teams do not value him. And it's clear Chicago overplayed their hand. But like if teams wanted him, they would be willing to pay that price for him, right? Because they'd still view him as a starter. So it's clear a lot of teams are just not that interested. So, and I know people are like, oh, wait till the draft. And I'm like, all right, cool. Why would you wait instead of going get him now if you wanted him? That's the whole thing, right? So unfortunately, it is what it is. Like I thought Justin Fields was going to be a good NFL quarterback. And speaking of the quarterback class this year, like the 2021 class is kind of like the worst case scenario where you get Trevor Lawrence as the only starter and then nobody else starting. I think this year it's going to turn out a little bit different. It's just how variance plays out, right? So we'll have a few starters coming in. And yeah, if you're still holding Fields at this point, like, are you going to be able to sell him? Like, what do you do? Like, you just have to ride it out, I guess.
You have to ride it out.
Yeah. Like, in hope he lands somewhere and they get injured, they trade for him, he's starting, and then, maybe it works out. But it seems like a long uphill battle for him where it's kind of just like, sorry, man. You could have sold Justin Fields anytime in the last couple of years if you wanted to. You hold on to him. Like, that's where they talk about missing windows of selling. This is exactly what Justin Fields. You missed the window to sell. Now you got to ride it out.
Yeah, this is Trey Lance. Same sort of deal. At this point, you're holding the bag, and you're just hoping that that bag of crap turns into a bag of gold, and someone signs it. You were like, oh, maybe Minnesota is going to take a chance on Trey Lance. No, Trey Lance is dead at this point. He's cuttable, and I think with Justin Fields, unfortunately, if he doesn't get a chance from an NFL team and becomes a backup, you're going to see a similar sort of situation where, just like you said, you missed the window and, you're left holding the bag there. But that's enough quarterback talk. Let's quickly move through 2 or 3 of the notable signings here at wide receiver and tight end. The big one is Darnell Mooney at wide receiver, moving from Chicago to Atlanta. 13 mil a year, 3 years, 39 million. And he gets to play second fiddle, or I guess third fiddle in the passing offense to Kyle Pitts and, of course, our favorite guy over here, Drake London. Darnell Mooney, where do you see him when it's all said and done? The season's over, assuming health of everybody across the board in a Kirk Cousins-led offense. Where do you think he could finish as a PPR wide receiver?
I mean, it's going to be tough for him to top like the top 50 just based on being the third option of that offense. They also have Bijan Robinson, right? So it's, I mean, he's currently wide receiver 68 Dynasty. So if you want to throw him in as a package and maybe one of those guys gets hurt and it opens up for him, the thing for him that I think is he just helps out the offense. He gives them another capable NFL wide receiver, and he was paid like a capable NFL wide receiver. He's going to stretch the field deep, which is what we kind of talked about earlier when we were talking about Atlanta. That's what they need, right? They need a guy that can take the pressure off London, work with Pitts, and he could just stretch the field deep and open it up things for those two guys. Like, I think that's more the scenario for him. Like, as a best ball receiver, I think he's a fine target because he's going to have a blow-up game every now and then. But, I mean, maybe you could talk yourself into him being a flex play. I would just be like, you know what? He's more looking like a guy that I'm trying to sell if I get anything in return.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's more the way that I would personally view it. What about yourself?
100%. And I love Mooney, the talent. I just think you sell it like this. Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta. He's going to be wide open. He's going to be singled because the defenses have 3 other guys that they need to worry about covering in terms of London, Pitts, and Bijan. And Zach Robinson's coming over. He's instituting 3 wide receiver sets, right? They're going to be throwing the ball over the yard. That's how you sell Darnell Mooney and get him off your squad and get a second in return because – look, it's just not going to be there for him. He's going to have his blow up games. I think he's good enough to, become a wide receiver 1, 3, 4 weeks a season. You just never know when that's going to happen. He's for that reason, he's a good best ball pickup. But in terms of dynasty, in terms of redraft, no, I don't want anything to do with him, and I'm selling him if I can.
Yeah, I think he can give you between 500 and 800 yards in that offense, like closer to 500 more than likely. But if you kind of, play it out, he's going to be the third pass catcher, and that is Bijan. So, he'll, get down. But yeah, he's going to be good for an NFL team. And that's what matters. Like, same thing with Gabe Davis when I was talking about this yesterday. I was like, it's good for the NFL team more so than it is for fantasies. Like, this is what these guys offer. They're capable NFL wide receivers. I know people say they suck. Like, they're solid. They're getting paid and maybe it's a little bit overpaid, but teams have needs. They got to make these dudes, they got to work with it. So, you know what? You improve your team, and that's what you do. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think we're on the same page with our movie.
Yep. A couple of other wide receiver signings of note, but nothing really to talk about much. Devontae Parker goes to Philadelphia on a 1-year deal. He makes more money than Noah Brown, who stays in Houston. Noah Brown, I really like. He had some huge boom games. And Tank Dell may not necessarily be 100% ready to go week 1. I think for me, Noah Brown at least is interesting from a fantasy perspective. I'm not necessarily going out and buying him, but if I have him on a roster or, I can get him as a throw-in deal that makes me feel good about, I can't even think of anything at the moment, but potentially tearing down or getting rid of maybe like a TJ Hawkinson who's likely out for half the season. And picking up a better tight end, and I get Noah Brown thrown in. At least he can be a serviceable backup, especially if Collins goes down. We know in that offense he's capable of putting up numbers. How are you seeing Noah Brown? Do you feel like he's someone worth stashing on your roster just in case?
I mean, he's kind of one of the few what we call like we talk about these running backs that are backups that can step in. He's not going to give you that production level like of Tank Brown and Nico Collins, but he can, he can have some good weeks every now and then. So yeah, if it's an injury situation, and sure, you want to add him in as a free throw in because no one's going to value him as a 3rd round pick or anything like that.
Exactly.
It's you know what I'm saying? So if it's all right, give me this package and I'm getting everything I want. You already got the plus. It's all right, let me get Noah Brown, and they're going to be like, oh no, Noah Brown, right? I think you can get him. Get him through, yeah, exactly. If you really want to target him, you can get him thrown into a deal. It's totally fine. And like you're saying, if Tank Dell's out early in the year, he's come back slowly. Noah Brown's capable. He can, give you some production in the meantime. So yeah, I'm totally fine with that move. I don't mind it at all.
Noah Brown had a 2-week stretch last year, weeks 9 and 10. He went 6 targets for 6 receptions, 153 yards and a touchdown. He followed that up with 8 targets, 7 receptions, 172 yards, then got injured. Then his first full game back, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 82 yards and a touchdown. He's capable, right? And I think that's the biggest point here is he's not someone that you're going to probably go out and pursue, but he is at least interesting. That Houston offense has solidified itself. Now adding Joe Mixon, I mean, I just want pieces, right?
Yeah,
so if
exactly.
I'd prefer to stash Noah Brown in case of injury as opposed to, we don't know where he's landing, but let's assume it's last year and Tyler Boyd is on Cincinnati, right? I would much prefer to stash. I guess I value them the same. I'd prefer to stash those kind of guys in great offenses as opposed to, I don't know, an Alec Pierce still holding out hope in Indianapolis, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm 100% with you. Like, Indianapolis is going to bring in somebody, and if they get Bowers, like, sayonara Alec Pierce. It was nice knowing you.
There you go.
But like 100%, you want the pass catchers of those like really good offenses, like the guys like we talk about Kirk Cousins. Like same thing with Darnell Mooney, same type of situation. I expect him to do better than those guys, but it's a similar mindset we have with those guys. It's like, all right, if an injury happens, they're stepping in. It's not going to be similar, but you'll be able to flex them. Mooney more particularly than those guys, but you'll be able to consistently flex them in a situation like that. So yeah, 100%. You just want to stash like those guys if they're free, like because a lot of these guys are. Like if they're rostered, it's not very high percentage. So you can check your waiver wire. If they're available, just pick them up. You know what I'm saying? Just do that.
That's it. The last thing that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to get out of here pretty quickly, but a couple of tight end signings. I don't think they matter much, but I'm just going to throw out the names for you for day 2 tight end signings, and we'll see how you're feeling. Noah Fant, I believe, was a yesterday signing, but we didn't hit on him. So he's going back to Seattle, 2 years, $21 million. Will Disley is leaving Seattle and going to the Chargers, 3 years, $14 million. Gerald Everett is leaving the Chargers and he's signing with Chicago, 2 years, $12 million. And then Irv Smith is going to Kansas City on a 1-year deal for $1.2 million. Mike Gesicki, contract details unknown, going to Cincinnati. Are we falling for any of this, Jesse? Any name that you think is interesting here?
Yeah, sell Travis Kelce immediately. It's all over for Kelce.
Irv is coming to town, baby. I was so big on Irv for a long time.
So many people were. And so, like, he's that type of tight end that's the tweener that it's really hard for them because he's smaller. And there's a lot of those tight ends coming in this class. If you're smaller, you need to be schemed open. Like, this is the thing because you're not a blocker. You can't play outside. You're kind of in that tweener role. So
Andy Reid, baby. This
is why Evan Ingram's more the exception than the rule because a lot of these guys fall the wayside just because it's really hard to get those guys open. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to talk yourself into Irv Smith, have at it. Go talk yourself into Noah Fant, whatever. Like,
no, don't do that.
The whole Noah Fant situation is he's the 4th option at best on that offense.
True.
And it's Geno Smith. It's not a Kirk Cousins offense. It's a tear down. It's like he's going to consolidate on those guys. And then it's like, all right, cool. Maybe I'll throw Noah Fant the ball. Maybe I'll get a touchdown. But, like, what's the upside? Tight end 12 for Noah Fant? Like, that's when it gets to these guys, I'm like, just get the cheap one. Don't talk yourself into Noah Fant. I get it. He has athleticism. He's a former first-round pick. But, dude, he's buried. He's absolutely buried. So, yeah, if Irv Smith's available for free, sure, pick him up. Like, that's fine if you want to. But, no. And, like, the one thing I will say is, like, this hurts Cole Kmet a lot because Gerald Everett's going to carve out a role. And if he's not running 80% of routes, like, even with Caleb Williams in that offense, it's going to be better. It's just very difficult. You have to be hyper efficient. So if you have Cole Kmet, you might want to look to get out before like people realize like what's going on with Everett. So if you can move off of him now's a great time. Or even tier down to a guy in a similar like range. Let me see where he's at really quick. I can find him.
While you find it, this is like the Mercedes Lewis problem, right? With Aaron Rodgers, is that he was always coming in, whether it's Green Bay, whether it's Jacksonville back in the day, and he was just tanking the value because that guy would always get on the field. Here, we're not necessarily talking about a situation where Gerald Everett is an amazing blocking threat, but he's certainly going to challenge Cole Kmet. Maybe you keep Cole Kmet in, and then Gerald Everett is the one who's going out and running routes, which is, again, concerning.
Yeah, like Cole Kmet's the tight end 12 right now. I'm looking, and like I would just prefer Dalton Schultz straight up. Who's a tight end 17. So tier down to one of those guys in that range. Like take a dart on Pat Freiermuth, Luke Musgrave, whatever it is. But the market is going to collapse on Cole Kmet once he starts playing because people are going to realize, oh, he's not running all the routes. Yeah. He's not going to have boom weeks unless he gets touchdowns. It's just going to be very difficult. So I don't know why they signed Gerald Everett. Sometimes teams just do this because they want to, insulate their position and they're not sold on the guy. Maybe that's what it is, but. Yeah, I think he's the biggest loser of the tight ends, like of this whole situation, because he was valued highly. and it's going to come crashing down. So like I want no part of Cole Kmet as current value.
Yeah. Plus, we've got a likely, at least if you believe all the mocks, a top end wide receiver coming into town at pick number 9. Very likely. If not, there's a lot of wide receivers who are available in the second round. I wonder if it's the Bears. I have to look it up, but there is a team with 4 second-round picks, and I know the Bears have been doing their due diligence collecting picks over the years. So listen, it's perfect timing right now. Or in the next, month, maybe before the NFL draft, if you can get out and Cole Kmet. 100% agree with that. Last point I'll make, Jesse, and I'm going to try and sell you this case for a 28-year-old Mike Gesicki moving from New England, moving to Cincinnati. T. Higgins is going to be traded, we think. Tyler Boyd is out. Joe Mixon is out. Zach Moss, maybe not the pass catcher Joe Mixon was, but he's close. Chase Brown, maybe not as involved in the offense as we'd hoped. Is there room for Mike Gesicki to see 100 targets?
100?
Okay, 83 targets from Joe Burrow this season.
So, if you ever watched him do the gritty, if I was this quarterback and I saw him do that, I'm never fucking throwing you the ball again. It's so hideous, dude. What are you doing here? But no, seriously, if he's the number 2 option on that team, sure, you can talk yourself into it. But we have the draft. Free agency's still going on. We don't know what's going to happen with T. Higgins. He could still be there. I think there's a lot of ways this goes wrong, talking yourself into Mike Gesicki. But yeah, we're talking he's tight end. Doesn't even matter right now. I'm looking at values. I can't even find him. He's way down. I think he's tight end 43 or some just nonsense. People do not care about Mike Gesicki. I don't even know if he's actually on the list of tight ends in the Dynasty Data Lab. Let me see if I can find him real quick. But yeah, it's just sure, if you really want to do it, just because it's Joe Burrow. No. But the problem is when we talk ourselves to these good offenses, the player still has to be able and capable. We saw in Miami, he just could never produce with the volume. He was getting targeted. He was just inefficient. So I just think he's one of those guys that for some reason doesn't live up to the athleticism and pedigree we hope because he has a high RAS score, decent draft capital. It's just, sometimes guys don't hit. And we've done this with some of the same thing with Irv Smith. It's we keep talking ourselves into these guys. If you want to do it, feel free. But don't come crying to me when he's tight end 30 and stuff for a year.
Listen, for my money, I'll take the shot on Andre Iosivas as the second target in that offense over a Mike Gesicki. But to be honest, I don't think it's going to be either of those guys. Cincinnati needs to go out and get themselves one of these top-end wide receivers, especially if they're dealing T. Higgins. They're going to deal T. Higgins for what? Late first, early second-round pick, most likely. So
yeah, I saw Barnwell had it from pick 27 all the way up to 40. That was the range of picks they were talking about. If they get it, they're basically just going to draft a wide receiver at that spot, right? That's pretty much.
Yeah, you take Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas Jr. If they're, whatever one of that third tier of guys falls, that's who you end up with, and you pair him with Jamar Chase and now Mike Gesicki. Listen. So it's real tough, but not for Mike Gesicki. Go ahead and just leave him wherever he is. Hopefully not on your roster.
So let me ask you this. How do you feel about Joe Burrow if T. Higgins does leave? Does his value change at all for you? Is he kind of just in that same tier of quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? It's not just T. Higgins, it's Tyler Boyd, right? We saw Tyler Boyd be incredibly productive, and he's a professional wide receiver. He was able to get open over the middle of the field. Right now, you're replacing that with, I assume it's Iosivas. I assume it's Charlie Jones over there. They can't bring in too many wide receivers, and they haven't made any moves in free agencies to go get a wide receiver at the moment. And if you're just talking about Zach Moss back there in the backfield with Chase Brown, unless Chase Brown's usage is going to severely spike next season, which I don't think it's going to. Yeah, and now we have Mike Gesicki, Irv Smith. That's a 1-for-1. That's a lateral move. So it's a good point. For me, it's the loss of weapons plus the fact that this wrist injury that he's been dealing with has never been dealt with by an NFL quarterback before. I forget the exact terminology, but say again?
I said it's a weird injury. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And it was Jesse Morse, or I forget who it was, but one of these Twitter doctors who puts out great information about these injuries, just saying that, no quarterback has ever had to deal with this. The recovery window is all over the map. And it really depends on, is he going to get full functionality back in his wrist movement? That's super scary for a guy of his talent who relies on accuracy and who relies on snapping his wrist the way that he does to get the spin on that ball. These elite quarterbacks, if you're talking about wrist, hand, thumb, we've seen it before. it can really sap their value. So is he going to be 100% healthy to start the season? Is he going to be 100% healthy at any point during the season, at any point ever again? I don't know. You pair that with T. Higgins leaving, them likely just bringing in a rookie. Yeah, it's a fair point. I'm really a Joe Burrow truther. I think he's been phenomenal so far. He showed everything that you want from an NFL caliber quarterback and a dynasty quarterback to be your QB1 and feel comfortable. Now, I agree. It's a bit up in the air. So, there's an interesting question of, I think that at this point, Lamar Jackson has superseded him in terms of where you're taking him. But it's an interesting question of Burrow or Herbert, right? In an offense that is supposed to now be more run heavy in Los Angeles under Jim Harbaugh. Is Herbert going to see the volume versus will Joe Burrow be able to be relevant as a high-end QB1? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Let's play a little name game here. So quarterback 10 is Kyler Murray. Are you taking Joe Burrow or Kyler Murray?
Burrow.
And QB9 is Jordan Love. Are you taking Jordan Love or Joe Burrow?
That's so tough.
I know you like Love. That's why.
I really do. He's not there yet. From a value perspective, I need to see it again. But it's interesting because you could trade down, right? Mm-hmm. You could deal Burrow for Love and a first, you think?
Yeah, there's about 10 picks difference between them, so it's about a first. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. Would you prefer him or Anthony Richardson, who's QB8?
That's so hard. Richardson, the player, I really like. Richardson, the shoulder first runner who has already had an injury history in the NFL. I hate that. I feel like Burrow is more safe just in terms of an injury, from an injury perspective. Maybe that's not true, but that's how I feel at the moment. So Burrow.
So you're probably more looking like you would still draft him kind of in his range as QB 6 or 7 with Herbert, and then ideally you're more looking to tier down than you are to like take those guys above him.
Yeah, I'd say if anything, Jordan Love is undervalued, but otherwise, I think Burrow is right there. The real question for me is it Burrow or Herbert? And at the moment, it's Burrow for me. Yeah. But I don't know. There's a lot of question marks like you bring up.
Well, yeah, and Herbert on the flip side, like that's transitioning to a run-first offense. Like we're all under that assumption that's going to happen. And if that does happen, it's just like you're not going to get the high-level passing. So it's another way of looking at like both these guys where they're talking about the 106 to 108 range, that's where they're going. Like, is that where they should be, or is their value going to creep back a little bit? Are we going to see them push back to the late first in startups? Like, you can talk yourself into that. I mean, obviously they're very good quarterbacks. I don't think that's really the issue. It's just the situation and talent around them. So it's just kind of a fun thought experiment when you're unsure with these tiers and how you're ranking players to go look at how they're being drafted and be like, you know what, I actually prefer this guy above this guy. Like I would personally take Burrow above Herbert. It's just been more consistent. Yep. But like if we get to Anthony Richardson or Kyler Murray, like I'll be like, all right, what kind of plus can I get on top? Yeah. And then I'm going to get that rushing quarterback. Like you talk yourself, or people love Jordan Love. Like I would take Jordan Love at 110. So we can talk about that and go there. So yeah, there's ways to move off of Burrow if you're interested.
Where is Stroud right now? QB4?
Yeah, he's QB3. He's going ahead of Jalen Hurts right now. So
that's
it's gonna be tough
when you think about it. It's not so crazy when you think about it.
I'd personally rather cheer up to Hurts if I'm tearing up to one of those guys, just because I think Stroud has some of those limitations that Burrow has, like the high end, like fantasy breaking season's not there for him. But yeah, he's a very, very, very high floor player. So he gives you like 20 points a game. You're happy with that, you roll. But like I think the better way to do it is if you could tier up into the truly elites, like we talk about Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, those guys. If you could do that with Burrow, like you send a first out and you go up to there and you just, like your head's clean, you're like, cool, we're done with that. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. If you really want to move off of him and you don't want to tear down to uncertainty, you like go into the truly like the high end 101, 102 guys. And I think that's the safer way to do it.
Yeah. And from a dynasty perspective, if Pat Mahomes hadn't won the Super Bowl, I think he'd be an insane value right now. Now he's probably still a value. If you do Burrow in a first for Mahomes, you might get some people who take that. So I'd do that all day.
100%. Me too.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that's going to conclude this for day 2, which is still happening. Day 2 of free agency. If you want any other content like this, we appreciate you joining us. Join us all the time at fantasyfootballuniverse.com. We're on X or Twitter. We're on YouTube, putting out daily content right now. We're still in the middle of our rookie sneak peek preview. We've got about 100 rookies, write-ups, video, all sorts of analysis on those guys to get you ready for your rookie drafts. We also have this free agency series. We got plenty of different podcasts on our YouTube channel for you to check out. So putting out daily content as much as possible, getting it out there, starting it up. Again, fantasyfootballuniverse.com. So we appreciate you joining us here. We appreciate you joining us there. Join us anywhere you can. We'll join you, and hopefully we'll all win some ships together. So for myself, for Jesse, thanks for joining us on the Fantasy Football Universe, and we will probably see you tomorrow to wrap up free agency. Have a good one, guys.
Take care, folks.